All right. My name is Alexa Shaw, and I am in Honor 199 class with Jackson Bartlett. I've got Kelly with me today. Hi, Kelly. Thanks for joining me um,
Hello, thank you.
for this interview on how we interact with racism and anti-racism. Let's start off with you. Can you tell us your name, your major, your year, and where you're from?
My name is Kelly Price. My major is criminal justice psychology and whatever else I throw in there. I am 38 years old and I currently reside in Delville. I'm in my senior year.
Okay, sounds good. And so in our class, you are pretty much the only adult other than our professor, Dr. Bartlett. So, what made you want to go to college now?
Well, at a young age in high school in my senior year, I was told that if I didn't have kids soon, that I wouldn't be able to have them. And that was something that I wanted. So when I turned 18, I decided to start having kids at that point in time. I only meant to have one. My husband was told in the military, of course, of all places, that there was no way whatsoever, no chance at all of him being able to have kids. Well, long and behold, I have my classes scheduled, ready to go back to school. My oldest was 4 at the time. And then 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant. So, yeah, we went ahead and it's like, okay, I guess we're having the rest of our family now,
Mm-hmm.
and then decided to go back later.
Right. Well, better late than never.
Yeah.
You still got time. So, how did you end up in this class specifically?
Well, I started off in psychology because I wanted to do like behavior analysis and work in prisons. Um, but then the more I realized what our society's like and the racism that we're facing now, it got changed. Everything I wanted to do changed. And then this class I took because when I signed up for honors, um, it was on there. I had absolutely no idea what this class would be.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. um, so what did you expect coming into the class?
I thought it was going to be in all honesty, like a boring history class. And then when I got my books in the mail, the candy and the other one, I was so excited. It's so happy. Once I saw the syllabus, I was like, oh God, thank you. Yes,
We're talking about things that are actually important.
yes.
Yep. All right, so let's talk a little bit about where you're coming from. So what was your hometown or neighborhood like growing up as far as like class and race and education level?
So I grew up in Alexandria, Indiana. It's not too far away from here. It's about 15 to 20 minutes out. Definitely not a very diverse area. It was all white people until possibly high school. Um, as far as class goes, I would have been considered as, I'm going to say lower class, maybe somewhere in the mid to higher end of lower class. Um, my family definitely didn't have a ton of money while I was growing up. There wasn't a lot of rich kids. There was maybe a couple who were considered as possibly middle class, but not a lot.
Okay. Um, so like as far as like everyone in your neighborhood, it was mostly like lower and middle class.
Yeah, it'd be somewhere right around lower class to like upper lower class.
Okay.
Maybe some at the lower middle end. Maybe.
So how does that do you live in Muncie now?
No, I live in Delville now.
Okay, so how does that like compare to where you grow up?
It's better here, but only by so much. I would say on perspective, it's a little bit better, but it's still, I look around and I see maybe one family that doesn't look like me from time to time.
Yeah. So, did you ever like think about race at all growing up?
Well, it was a bit of a different time. Pushing 40 now, I saw a lot of really bad things go down when it comes to race because I lived really close to Elwood, which is like KKK capital.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so my generation, and I'm at the very top of the millennials, like the very, very like last could possibly be considered as a millennial. So us and right around Gen X, we had to deal with a lot of racist talk growing up, and a lot of us decided to combat it. So we were constantly at ends with people about anywhere from 10 years to 20 years older than myself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of race talk while growing up.
Yeah. So you got to like experience a lot of the like hyper incarceration of the 90s and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, when people around you talked about race, what what did they talk about?
It was typically almost always centered around um, either illegal immigrants or crime rates. It was always a whole lot of inward this, inward that, um, always talking about how Black people were killers, robbed banks. And then, of course, it was with people of like right around the browner skin tones, it was they were rapists, they were drug dealers. A whole lot of misinformation was taken when I was young.
Yeah. Um so when did you first start like thinking about race or like notice other races?
It was definitely sometime in elementary school. Like I said, we had it was mainly all white school, but because of the area that we lived in, we heard a lot of negative comments made about other ethnicities. And it didn't take long. I'd say by the time I hit fifth grade, that we started trying to combat it. At that point in time, it was enough at such a young age. We would hear our aunts or uncles or even at the grocery store. I mean, it was a ridiculous amount of places where you could hear people just bad mouthing other ethnicities.
Mhm. So we talk a lot about intersectionality in Honors 199 class, which is the idea that you can hold more than one position. You can be a woman and be queer, and that results in a unique viewpoint. So, how do your other identities or social positions like gender, class, and religion shape your experience with racism?
It's definitely made me more compassionate and able to cross over that consideration for other people, period. Being a woman and growing up in the time frame that I did, I mean, it was harsh. We were sexually assaulted a lot. We had to deal with a lot of crap that we shouldn't have had to deal with. And at that point in time, you couldn't record people. We were just supposed to deal with it a lot like it is now, unfortunately. Um, but at least now we can record incidents. Um, Not that anything will be done about it, but we can at least show that it's happening.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really made me consider other people's feelings and how they identify a lot more than possibly people who haven't had to deal with sexist behavior. Religion is another big one. I'm not going to disclose my religion, but I've dealt with a lot of bias because of it, because it my religion intersects with two religions. So you're kind of hated out of both divisions.
Mhm. Yeah. So, how does like the way that racism affected you growing up and the way that you were taught about it affect how you like teach your kids about it? Or
We
do
have
you
a lot of conversations about race in my house, to the point where the kids will literally run from me. We have a lot of educated talks on a lot of different topics. Um, I think that's the one of the best ways to help with racism and to help combat it, to be anti-racist, is to have those tough discussions with your kids. And you got to talk about the microaggressions too. You can't just tell your kids to, oh, well, be nice to everybody. And like my youngest, he's 10, and like, well, he's 11 now, but he wanted to be a cop for, well, at least since he was like 8 or so. And that's a really hard conversation for me to have with him, is, buddy, I'm glad you want to be an officer. That's great that you want to help people out, but we need to talk about the disparities, and we need to talk about the actions and the lack of accountability that we have right now throughout the majority of our police departments. And we've sat down and we've had a lot of tough conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. So moving on to like a larger view of racism and anti-racism, how have the events of 2020, like the COVID-19 pandemic and the protests over the summer of police brutality and the election, shaped your perception of racism and anti-racism in the US?
Well, this is an area that I am all into. Um, Black Lives Matter, when they came out, the videos of them blocking the roads, at first, I was kind of with some of the other people, like, yeah, I don't want to run anyone over, but if it looked like an emergency situation, if my car was being surrounded, and of course, people who's blocking the roads, they don't just surround cars and drag people out. You know, being my age, I remember the riots in New York, and previous recordings, which was probably Fox News, would be my guess because of the way it was spun. So there's a certain mentality when it comes to having your vehicle surrounded. I never would have wanted to have hurt anyone, but it was like, if I had to situation. But then I noticed the flashback that they were getting from it, the repercussions. It's like nobody wants to be treated that way. Nothing good is happening for them from blocking off the traffic. Everybody is attacking them. They're not receiving good feedback. So I have to be missing something. What am I missing? So I started doing a lot of research, and that's where the understanding of our government really started to come into play. Because whereas before I saw myself as anti-racist, I still believed in a lot of different racist ideologies, a lot of them. And when I started to uncover just how racist our policies are, it literally changed everything. And of course, seeing with, say, COVID right now, I mean, Black people and Latinx people are dying at such high rates because they don't have access to the same care. And it's not just about access. That's what people don't understand. When they go into the doctor and the doctor asks what's going on, they don't believe them. They don't believe that these people are in pain. They think they're drug seeking. Um, so those racist ideologies are literally into every single framework of what we do. And it's just so many little connectors in between these areas, in between when, say, Black people go to the doctor, in between um, when they're out in public. A lot of people that aren't white, I remember when we first started doing the mask wearing, they were being kicked out of stores for wearing a mask. Horrible. Um, and then the complete opposite as well. If they were wearing like a shirt or something up over their face to be covered, they met the standards. But then these people would be kicked off the trains in a very brutal the method. So seeing seeing the disparities during the pandemic, along with the hyper incarceration, and seeing who's going to jail, who's being let off for the same offenses, it's really made me confident in the path that I've set myself on to try to fight the racism.
Yeah. Yeah, this year definitely, like, COVID has highlighted a lot of medical bias that still exists. And it's just been a very large culmination of how racism still pervades American society.
From what I understand, some of our books are still teaching that Black people don't feel pain, or they feel pain at, they tolerate it better than other ethnicities, which is really weird that
Yeah,
that's even still being printed out today.
that is wild. So have you been involved in any anti-racist actions or activities this year? Have you been to any like protests?
I haven't been to any protests, but I have made material for protests, and I've made like little education pamphlets and whatnot, that I've gotten to people who are going to protest. That way they can be distributed. The pamphlets that I made went around, I can't remember, I think it was when everybody had started talking about our histories being erased, our histories being. So I addressed that in the pamphlets and got them out. That way they could be distributed. Um, I don't know if they ever helped change any minds, because we know that racism is very hard to change when people are their views are hard to change when they're heated up.
Yeah. Yeah, so how do you think that protests affect things like anti-racist policies?
I think they're good for bringing awareness to the larger problems, but something we always forget about is civil unrest is a necessity for change, because if you're not raising hell, nothing is going to change. Racism is a huge profit maker. Um, our government makes a lot of money off of the racist policies through lobbying, and it's not small amounts. A lot of people, they don't understand lobbying. There's some different um, there's a few different places online that you can go to. I think one of them is called like Open Secrets, and you can type in your senator, or you can type in whoever it is that you want to. There's another one that does pharmaceuticals as well, to where you can check up on your doctor. But when you look at how much money our Congress is making off of these policies, it's a huge, ungodly amount that unless we shut down lobbying, we're not we're not going to be able to stop it. They're making money hand over fist right now off of these policies. So the civil unrest is a necessity. When people see rioting, they get really upset. But a lot of our rights, it'd be nice if we could do it in a different manner. But it's got to be some type of civil unrest. You have to have some type of civil disobedience, or the change doesn't happen. And it has to be widespread and consistent. So as much as I would like to say that, the riots are a horrible thing, I don't think they are. Like me and you, we can vote, and we can do things that women couldn't do before. We can have land. We can have debit cards. These things we didn't even used to be able to get our information told to us by our doctor. It was told to our husbands
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, or our dads. Like, that's disgusting. And we talk about, oh well, the women protested. The women were locked in jail. They were beat. Nobody wants to talk about that side of it. Without the civil unrest, we don't have rights.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to like raise some hell if we want to help out when it comes to anti-racism.
I agree. So how would you describe race relations or race issues at Ball State and like how they're handled?
Well, considering that they had Ball State, the students had to have a protest just to get anything moving along, tells me that the faculty wasn't handling the issues as well as they could have. Um, and there's an entire organization there to help out with the race issues. And we've heard people and students. Well, we've actually heard a faculty member, a professor, tell us that if we want anything done, that it has to be the students. If we want anti-racist material or education material that's not been whitewashed, that we actually have to band together and go and ask for it. That tells me the level that it's there. There's a lot of improvements to be made. It's not, the race relations aren't great if it takes a type of upheaval or 300 to 400 students going, hey, I don't want the whitewashed history to make it happen.
Yeah, it is frustrating that professors and faculty a lot of times don't want to change anything on their own.
Or that they're ignored when they try.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ball State is a diverse place. It advertises itself as a very diverse place, but it's historically white. So how have you navigated that whiteness since you arrived at Ball State?
Well, with COVID, I haven't had a chance to really romp around the area very much, but from what I've seen, there's a whole lot of white people, a whole lot of white people. There's nowhere near the amount of minorities that should be at Ball State. Um, so I haven't really had a chance to be able to scope it out fully, but it's definitely not very diverse.
Yeah. So Ball State talks a lot about how it's increasing diversity. So do you think that they are actively trying to do that and succeeding at it, or do you view it as more of a PR stunt than a genuine effort?
Probably a little bit of both. In today's climate, since we do a lot of fact checking and a lot of digging now into the background, universities are going to have to back up what they say. I think that they're trying to, um, but I know Indiana has had a very bad habit, like every other state, with locking up brown and black bodies. Um, and once you're locked up for, say, a drug charge, you can't get financial aid. So even if colleges are giving it the good old college try to make the area more diverse, they're going to run into problems with people not being able to afford to be able to go to the school. From what I understand, Ball State has pretty good scholarships for people to help them out in that area, and I don't know what the qualifiers are. So I don't know if, say, black students can get the scholarships or not if they've had drug charges in their past on the record. It's probably a pretty good chance that they can't, but I don't want to say for sure when I don't know. I think they could definitely be giving a little bit better of an effort. From the few racist incidents that I've heard about being on campus, they could have dealt with them better. So I'm going to say that they're probably trying now because they have to. Um, but they could probably be trying better just to out of better intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have any specific ideas of ways that would be better at increasing diversity on campus?
I think trying to weed out racist faculty and professors would be a really good start. Um, while I'm not happy at the thought of running around firing people, students need to feel protected while they're at the school. And if you have to deal with microaggressions on your own, a lot of times people are told to deal with them themselves instead of the school dealing with the issue. Oh, well, confront it. people need to be able to have a type of normalcy. And if you can't come to college and have a normalcy, then it's really hard to learn and be educated. So I think if Ball State started to weed out some of the racist faculty members, and yeah, I mean, draw a line. You know, if a faculty member has a record a mile long of microaggressions, they should go. I don't much care about their tenure or how they were raised or anything like that, because even if they were victims themselves, and I do believe that a lot of racism is kind of generational. um, I believe a lot of people, while they can learn that it affects their brain neurally, even being a victim, I don't believe it's a reason to be able to continue the cycle. I think they should get rid of the people who have, say, so many marks against them, so many microaggressions against them. And then there should be better education, better teachings for the instructors, for them to understand they need to have some of their racist ideologies confronted that they might not be thinking about, such as Black on Black crime, um, environments that Black people, um, Black lower class people live in. So there's that touch of classism that they need to learn about as well, and hyper incarceration. Those ideologies and instructors need to be confronted. And then when it comes to students, microaggressing against each other or straight up racist incidents, the the school needs to handle it in a serious manner. It's a lot like sexual assault or rape on campus. Anytime there's a racist incident, and it can be at almost any of the schools, it's not taken seriously. You'll hear that it's being taken seriously, but then you'll see, say, evidence of a rape, really good evidence. And instead of the rapist having to leave campus or being prosecuted, it's the victim. The victim has to change their classes around. Um, except when it comes to microaggressions or hate crimes, nothing happens at all. And the victims are expected to go to class daily and see their aggressors. It's downright horrible. So they need to educate the staff. They need to educate the students better. They need to handle any hate crimes and microaggressions in a different manner. They need to handle them seriously and be serious about getting rid of professors who either perpetrate microaggressions themselves or sit there and watch it happen in their classroom and expect the students to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some really good points. So bringing it back to a smaller view of our class, what has this course meant for you personally?
This class has been absolutely great. Um, it's always hard when it comes to learning about racism and um, hearing stories. Personally, this class has touched my heart in a lot of different ways. There's been quite a few videos that's been very hard to watch, but it's meant the world to see how other people are affected by racism. Um, I learn best that way, by seeing how racism has affected people and hear their stories. I'm very empathetic, so it's exceedingly heart-wrenching, but this class has furthered my understanding of just how deep of a level racism hurts people. So personally, this class has been great for me.
Yeah. So, what have you learned this semester that you think has been like most influential and you'll take with you?
I think the discussions on the intersexuality, um, I think the intersexuality has definitely been very influential for people being not just a woman, but a Black woman, and the information on the Black lesbian women, what they have to go through, how they've tried to manage through the world. I can't remember who it was that did the TED Talk, but she was talking about how big corporations, well, probably all corporations really, are managing to get away with racism and sexism because they'll address them separately, but they're not being addressed together, and they're barely meeting the requirements separately, but not together. So I think the discussions on that has really taught me a lot.
Yeah, just giving intersectionality a name, I think, is really important too. So what parts of this class do you think were most beneficial in relation to like your everyday life outside of class?
I would have to say the red dot and the red lining, because that's something here in my town that really concerns me, and I want to look into it. Seeing the map of the Muncie, the red dots, I need to check out here in Delville, because I've noticed we have off and on maybe one Black family at a time that lives in Delville, and this is actually, Delville's a pretty nice area that other schools will come to. Other people, parents will drive their kids here, but yet there's only one Black family from time to time. You can't tell me that there's not plenty of Black families from Anderson or Muncie that could be driving their kids here. We have one Black female officer, and there's no other ethnicities. It's all white. And then I haven't even seen any Latinx people here either. So I want to have a little check into it, see what I got, and confront the town.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think you've learned that has changed your perspective the most? Is it intersectionality or something else?
I would say an overall hearing other people's stories and
Yeah.
how racism's affected them. That's definitely brought in my knowledge the most. I had a pretty good understanding of anti-racism and racism before the class. I've been doing research and studying for years, but obviously as a white person, I can only go so far. You can only go so far without being whatever it is that you're looking into, without having personal hands-on experience with it. So the class has given me definitely a deeper knowledge than what I thought I was going to end up with. And it's also given me ideals on where to go to after this class.
Yeah. So, what do you think after learning everything we've learned in this class? What do you think it means to be an anti-racist?
I think to be an anti-racist, it has to be more than just talk. It has to be more than just definitely a little bit of confronting people, but attacking the bigger causes of it, like racist policies. We have to get rid of racist policies, and we have to try to do it. So that means that we need to be gathering up people, petitioning the government, and finding out who exactly is making these policies, and why we still have them on board. I think that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to government, is the amount of money that's in it. I mean, they're selling their souls right on out for however large sum of monies that we're getting. So we need to be able to find out the who the why, and what policies they've created, not just that are racist, but that are allowing them to stay in their positions. I mean, our Congress, they give themselves raises. They write laws that make it harder for us to get rid of them. We need to find out not just the racist laws and who's doing it, but what laws they're enacting that allows them to stay in place.
Yeah, that's really important. So, where do you see like Indiana or the US 5 or 10 years from now? Do you think anything is likely to cause widespread change in that time period, or do you think it'll take a lot longer?
I think if the civil unrest starts back up, and if enough people get involved in it, then there's, I hate to say it, but it's going to have to get really dirty, really nasty to make a big enough of a difference. So there's always appeasements that we're willing to do. You see schools do it all the time. You see the government do it all the time. They'll hand out little appeasements to try to quell the biggest numbers of people down. Oh, well, hey, we're giving you this, we're doing this. Look, we're defunding the police by just a little bit. All the states that's defunded the police, it's not been by a huge amount. And then they're not addressing the other issue. When you defund the police and you put social workers in, I remember we went over sections where Black women were having their babies removed at an exceedingly higher rate compared to white people, white women, for the same issues. So what good does it do to defund the police if we're going to throw another issue at minorities? It doesn't make much sense. So it's kind of like they're throwing appeasements out there, hoping that enough people will be quiet, or that they could be like, oh, look, we're doing this, this, and this for you. You should be happy with that. It's going to take a lot, and we're going to have to attack not just the government and their policies, but institutions as well. The fact that we have such a bad hyper incarceration rates, and then our courts are a huge issue. 95% of all cases ending in a plea bargain, people are still being intimidated into taking pleas that don't even meet the charge. And then of course there's policing. There's a lot to address in that area. There's so many areas that if we don't do this smartly, if we don't educate people at the same time, so we have to be anti-racist in words, we have to be anti-racist in actions, but it's going to have to be so well organized that there's civil unrest, and while there's civil unrest, people are receiving the education. Two is why there's civil unrest. So there has to be evidence backing up that education, along with the civil unrest. And then there has to be pressure on the government or on institutions to change their policies. So we have to ferret out the who and what's allowing them to stay there as well while they're making these horrible policies. I don't think that in our lifetime, I don't think that in my lifetime that I'm going to see huge change. I hope that the civil unrest will continue, and I hope that I'll at least see some type of moderate change. And I'm hoping to be a part of that process, and maybe even just a little bit can get the snowball going. But I don't think that it's going to be on a huge magnitude if we can't keep all those areas, if we can't attack them all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, how do you see this class like affecting your career since it's your senior year? Are you planning on going straight into the field or like continuing further education? And when you do get into the field, how do you think this class will affect your work?
Well, I think this class has really influenced me a lot. I wasn't expecting it to be what it was. I was expecting some history class that just went over, I don't know, some white version. Some more white version of history is what I expected. But I've been researching racism ever since I discovered how impactful racism is on our society. I've been digging into it, and it got to the point to where I was running out of proper sites. I was running out of the right information points. I was getting to a point where I had absolutely no idea where to look next. I had no idea how to enact ideals that I have now to try to help improve society. Um, so this class has made it to where now I have a whole list of resources, either that I can go back to or to go to next. So this class is a class that I will always be grateful for. Um, I don't know as far as other people in the class goes, as far as, say you have a person who is exceedingly racist and they take a class on racism. I hope that the class will open their eyes and change their perspective to start looking a little bit deeper, a little bit more below the surface. I think the class will be definitely impactful for a lot of people, hopefully. But for me, it's provided a lot of different resources and ideals as far as how to proceed next. I knew going after policy was going to have to be a thing. Um, as soon as I saw just how bad lobbying is, and what policies that lobbying affects. But now I have a little bit better of an idea of a couple of other organizations that I'm going to try to get a hold of and see if I can pitch in and help out in those ends. I think after here that I'm going to try to organize and move some pieces around on the board a little bit to see if I can confront some of these issues. But I'm definitely going to have to continue on and get my master's. Um, I know for sure it'll probably be in criminal justice. I'll have my bachelor's in criminal justice very shortly, but I don't know what to do next. If I should keep it concentrated in research, because I get to do research opportunities and independent studies this summer, which I'm really looking forward to. Um, but I don't know if I should keep it concentrated in research or if I need to add something like political science to it, or what I really need to do to be able to get my foot through the door. Because anybody who's making that kind of money, like our current government does, like our government officials do, and it's got to be statewide too. White collar crime is insanely huge, especially in areas that we trust,
Mm-hmm.
especially with names that we trust. Um, so I'm not for sure how I can get my foot through the door, but my next step is to try to get my foot through the door.
All right. So, um, in relation to this class, is there anything that you like wish we would have talked about or that you would add to the class if you were running it?
The other book that we read, not Kindy, but the other, do you remember what it was called?
White privilege.
I was so frustrated with that book because over and over again it would start to talk about Black women and the disparities and the issues that they face. And then it would just stop. When it talked about white privilege, it would go on forever about white privilege, which is great. But anytime it talked about Black women, for some reason, it would just stop. It never described their disparities. It didn't describe their issues. And I mean, what about Latinx women? What about Indigenous women? Like, there's so many women being left out and the disparities that they face, or how they feel about the world right now, or what needs to happen to help them. I'm glad that we're confronting white privilege. It definitely needs to be a thing. Um, but I would definitely love to see some more some more um, descriptions, some more detail when it comes to Black women. Let's see. I think if we were to, or if anything was to get added to the class as well, definitely descriptions on Black women, on what they're going through, or even other ethnicities. It could be literally all of them, whatever we could do in that area, plus tips on how to talk to people. There's a lot of white people right now who want to be allies, who want to help, and they have no idea what to say to people, um, how much to say to people, or what to do to help out with anti-racism. I've talked to a lot of different white people that are, I almost want to say, yeah, I'm going to say it, that are being a nuisance in Black spaces. If say you go onto Facebook and you're in a Black Lives Matter group, you're going to see a lot of white people asking questions, which is great that they want to learn, but this is information that they could be Googling instead of trying to make um, Black people do all the emotional labor. That's something that needs to be addressed as well. What they could be doing, like a whole list of resources would be good for that. There's also white or allyship pages that I've seen white people on. Um, Absolutely, there the questions would be good on, and teaching people how to not be offended when they get confronted, because that's something that that we have to deal with. We have to deal with the fact that we ourselves still have racist ideology, no matter how much we don't want to have it, that we're going to make microaggressions. We're going to say stupid things. We're going to do stupid things. No matter how much we try to prepare ourselves or try to not say them or do them, we're going to accidentally, if not intentionally, do stupid things and continue racist ideals. So definitely some more information for people who want to be allies. And I think maybe starting a little bit backwards might be helpful as well. Maybe going straight to changing policies, starting there, and then working back might help out a little bit. I know some people learn best when you show the bigger picture first, kind of like in, say you show a human body and then you talk about the organ systems, if you go backwards
Mm-hmm.
instead of going forwards and starting from atoms, might be a little bit easier for people if you show them the bigger picture and then break it down. But not everybody learns best that way.
Yeah.
Just a few ideals.
Yeah, those are good. So what would you say, to wrap this up, what would you say to someone watching this who is thinking about taking this class?
I would say take it. Definitely take it. If you can get your friends to take it, and be open when you come into this class. Be open to the ideals. Everything in your head's not going to be exactly um, how things work out. You're going to learn a lot about racism and anti-racism and what that means. And pay attention when you read the books. Reread the sentences. When you don't understand what they're saying, when you don't understand the full meaning, if you don't know a word, Google it. If you don't understand what the sentence is saying, then reread it or ask about it in class. One of your best resources is to ask questions. So know what you want to say before class, because the classes are typically only an hour long. So know what you want to say beforehand, write it down, and then ask the instructor.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish the interview?
Something people want to go and protest, and that's absolutely great. While you're at protest, you need to make sure that if you are white, that while you're at the protest, you're being support and not the not the main center of attention. That you're literally there asking what you can do. And anytime you're in a space that's not a white space, that you are more more quiet and supportful. Everybody needs a type of normalcy in their lives, and with how much racism there is, especially in the United States, people can't get that normalcy that they need, so they have to have spaces. And if you're constantly questioning or nagging at people in those spaces, they can't take a breather, they can't take a breath. So allow people to take a breath and make sure that you're not talking over other people.
Yeah, that's some good advice. All right, well, thanks for joining me for the interview today. I hope you had a good time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.